Imagine a watch that's sold for $17.8 million. Yeah, million. You might think it's covered in diamonds or dipped in gold. Nope. It's a simple steel sports watch that was almost ignored for years, gathering dust while people sought out flashier pieces when it was first released. But this isn't just any watch. This is the Rolex Paul Newman Daytona, a watch that redefined cool and rewrote history. And today, we are diving into why this watch is so legendary and why it'll never be replaced. Let's get started. Number 1, the celebrity connection. How Paul Newman made the Daytona an icon. Alright, let's rewind to the 1960s. Rolex releases a sporty new model called the Daytona. But here's the catch. It flops. Picture it. This watch is just sitting there, largely ignored. The Daytona's oversized look, that exotic dial with quirky Art Deco style, way ahead of its time. Totally out of sync with the styles of the day. Then, enter Paul Newman, Hollywood's golden boy, Oscar-winning actor, race car driver, and all-around cool guy with charisma to spare. His wife, Joanne Woodward, gifts him a Daytona with an unusual dial, the now famous exotic dial with red accents and those bold subdials. Paul wears it everywhere, on the racetrack, on movie sets, even just casually out and about. And with every snap of the paparazzi, his Daytona becomes something more than just a watch. It is the watch that Paul Newman made iconic. It's like when rock stars turned Converse sneakers into a symbol of rebellion. Suddenly, the Daytona is no longer just a timepiece. It is Paul's legacy on your wrist. It embodies his style, his confidence, his rebellious love for racing, and that effortlessly cool Hollywood charm we all secretly want to channel. Thanks to Paul, the Daytona skyrockets from the shadows to superstardom, forever redefining what it means to wear a Rolex. Number 2, design and uniqueness, the iconic exotic dial. Now, here's where things really get interesting. Rolex Daytonas are iconic enough on their own, but the Paul Newman dial? That's a whole other level. Rolex threw this dial design into the mix as a bit of an experiment. It had contrasting colors, big, bold fonts, and those unmistakable Art Deco subdials with little square-shaped ends on the markers. It was daring, different, and maybe even a bit rebellious for Rolex's usual vibe. And here's the kicker. People at the time, they thought it was too much. Some even called it gaudy. But fast forward a few decades, and that exotic dial is the stuff of legends. You can see one of these babies from across the room, and you just know it's a Paul Newman. It's like spotting a Ferrari tucked between a row of minivans. It is instantly recognizable, effortlessly stylish, and it stands out in all the best ways. That bold design didn't just age well, it became timeless. In a world dominated by sleek smartwatches and digital gadgets, the Paul Newman Daytona pulls off that perfect vintage style that somehow still feels relevant and cool. And let's be real here. Who else can pull off that kind of lasting appeal? It is the ultimate example of a design that refuses to follow trends, choosing instead to define its own. Number 3. How did the Paul Newman Daytona go from low demand to legendary status? This is where the story really heats up. Back in the 60s, Rolex launched these exotic dials, hoping to shake things up a bit. But the reaction? Well, let's just say that it wasn't quite what they expected. The exotic dials, now so coveted, were practically the misfits of the Rolex lineup. Dealers couldn't give them away. Some Daytona models just sat collecting dust on the shelves, seen as too bold, too quirky, too out there. But then, in the 80s and 90s, the vintage watch collectors started to see these exotics differently. Suddenly, what had been dismissed as a mistake by Rolex was being reimagined as a vintage masterpiece. Collectors were captivated by this unique, daring dial style, a feature so rare it was barely known to exist. And with this newfound interest, the few exotic dial Daytonas in circulation turned into the must-have item. The allure? pure scarcity. With only a limited number made, and even fewer still in pristine condition, these watches were like unicorns. Their rarity, combined with the fact that they had survived decades of being underrated, transformed them into holy grails of the watch world. And the best part? Rolex couldn't have planned it even if they tried. It's like trying to predict the next big trend years ahead. Sometimes it's going to be the quirkiest, most unexpected things that end up making history. Number 4. Auction record and investment impact. The $17.8 million shockwave. So, let's talk money. In 2017, Paul Newman's very own Daytona went up for auction. The watch that he actually wore, complete with the sweet engraved message from his wife, which read, "Drive carefully, me." The room was buzzing with anticipation, and when the hammer finally dropped, this steel Daytona sold for a jaw-dropping $17.8 million, setting a record for the most expensive Rolex ever sold. That price left people in stunned silence. It was a moment. And here's the wild part. This wasn't a gold watch, nor was it dripping in diamonds. It was a humble steel Daytona, just like the ones you could have ordered from a catalog in the 60s. But this sale flipped the watch world on its head. It proved that a watch's true value doesn't lie in precious metals or jewels. It lies in the legacy, the story, and the connection to history. Let's be real here. If you're a collector or an investor, hearing that a single Rolex Daytona went for $17.8 million probably made your pulse race a little. Suddenly, watches aren't just timepieces, they are assets, pieces of history that you can actually wear. The Paul Newman Daytona? It is the ultimate holy grail of watch investments, a piece that will probably only continue to rise in value as time goes on. And that's why, for both collectors and fans, there really will never be another Rolex quite like it. Number 5. Controversy and rarity. The wild rise of the quote-unquote ugly watch. Can we just take a moment to appreciate the pure irony here? The Paul Newman Daytona, the watch that everyone now obsesses over, was once considered the misfit of the Rolex family. Back then, people thought that the exotic dial looked, well, strange. Unattractive, even. Dealers couldn't move these things. It's like the underdog story that nobody saw coming, a black sheep that turned into the crown jewel of the watch world. Only a handful of these Daytonas with exotic dials were produced, adding an air of mystery and exclusivity to them. They weren't mass-produced, they weren't in demand, and most people didn't even know that they existed until their rarity made them priceless. And what's more captivating than a hidden gem that flew under the radar, only to rise as the ultimate collector's item? It is the ultimate quote-unquote plot twist in watch history, a piece that turned its so-called flaws into a phenomena. If there's one thing that the Paul Newman Daytona proves, it's that sometimes the thing that sets you apart is exactly what makes you unforgettable. Number 6. Distinctive aesthetic. Why the Paul Newman Daytona looks like no other. Let's be real here. You could put a Paul Newman Daytona next to any modern Rolex and it would stand out instantly. That Art Deco dial, the retro vibes, the contrast, it's got personality. Most watches are either too showy or too simple, but the Paul Newman Daytona hits this perfect balance. It's bold without being brash, vintage without being outdated. This unique aesthetic is why it's so easily recognizable. Put it in a thumbnail, and even people who aren't hardcore watch fans are going to be intrigued. It's different in a way that feels cool rather than trying too hard. And number 7, why the Paul Newman Daytona is irreplaceable. So, why will there never be another Paul Newman Daytona? It's simple. This watch isn't just a piece of steel with gears ticking away inside. It's a story, a living, breathing piece of history wrapped around a legacy. This Daytona isn't just about style or mechanics. It's about Paul Newman's effortless cool, his love for racing, and the unexpected twist that took this watch from an overlooked oddball to an icon. Imagine Rolex making another Daytona tomorrow. Even with all the exact features, it still wouldn't carry that same aura. It wouldn't have Paul Newman's fingerprints, the Hollywood glamour mixed with racetrack grit, or the wild journey from ugly duckling to legend. The Paul Newman Daytona has that unicorn factor, a piece so unique that it feels almost mythical. It's not just a watch, it's a reminder that sometimes the things we overlook, the ones that don't fit the mold, end up being the most priceless. This watch isn't just a Rolex, it's a legend. And it's a reminder that, just like in life, the most precious things are often those you least expect. And that's why the Rolex Paul Newman Daytona is truly one of a kind. It's more than just a piece of steel and glass. It's a symbol, a story, a slice of history wrapped around your wrist. Whether you're a collector, a watch enthusiast, or just someone who appreciates a good underdog story, the Paul Newman Daytona is the ultimate icon that'll never be replaced. So the next time you catch a glimpse of one, remember, you're looking at a legend. What do you think about it? Let me know in the comments down below, and I will be sure to respond to every single one of you. Like and subscribe if you love elegant timepieces. And if you don't subscribe, it means I'm just gonna have to wait another day to onboard you. Thanks for joining me on this journey. Until next time, keep ticking forward.